Hello, my name is Ryan, and welcome to my channel, Counting from Caleb. This is a video I've wanted to do for quite some time. This video will present that the Jubilee, or Yovel, is both the 50th year and the first year in the agricultural cycle set in place by Yahweh. This timing results in each Jubilee being separated by 49 years. It also presents the harmonious synchronization between the Nisan and Tishri calendars, and how the command to make the month of Abib, or Nisan, the beginning of the year. This video is a result of many hours of research between my good friend Sam Fisherman and myself, and we are pleased to be able to share our findings with all of you. Yahweh spoke to Moses and Aaron in the land of Egypt, saying, "This month shall be the beginning of months for you. It shall be the first month of the year to you." Rosh meaning head or beginning, and Hashanah meaning the year or complete year. This was God's instruction to Moses and Aaron that the month of Abib or Nisan, in which the Passover, the first Moedim, occurs, would be the first month of the year, setting the timing for the remaining Moedim, or appointed times, for the entire year. So the first month, being in the spring, would result in a year lasting from spring to spring. So how does this mesh with the civil calendar that includes the Sabbatical and Jubilee year, which begin and end in the fall? In Exodus 12:1-2, God instructs Moses and Aaron that the current month shall be the beginning of months for the Israelites. It is to be their first month of the year. This month is referred to as Abib, which not only names the month, but also describes the specific stage of growth of barley. Abib is a Hebrew term meaning ears, or green ears of grain, indicating barley has reached a stage of ripeness suitable for the offering as first fruits during the festival of unleavened bread. This agricultural state of barley crop was crucial for determining the beginning of the month of Abib because it signaled the start of the harvest season. If during the 12th month of the year the barley had not yet reached the Abib stage, it indicated that the seasons were not aligning with the lunar calendar. To correct this discrepancy, an additional month known as an Adar Bet, or second Adar, was added before starting the month of Abib. This intercalary month extended the year to 13 months. The addition of Adar Bet helps synchronize the lunar calendar, which is about 11 days shorter than the solar year, with the solar agricultural cycle. By adding a month when necessary, the Israelites ensured that the festivals tied to specific agricultural events occurred in their proper season each year. In essence, the Moedim are fixed points in a cyclical calendar, but their proper observance hinges on the state of the barley in Abib, which serves as the calibration point for the entire year. The civil calendar beginning in Tishri is dependent on this initial setting. Festivals and sabbatical years are timed appropriately within the agricultural cycle. This interconnected system ensures that the religious observances, civil events, and agricultural practices remain in harmony. God said in Genesis 8:22, "As long as the earth endures, seed time and harvest, cold and heat, summer and winter, day and night shall never cease." So as long as the earth endures, God's clock never stops. There are two Hebrew words that have been lost in translation that will unlock the connection between the spring and fall calendars. These two words are Hashanah and Bashanah. The word Hashanah translates to the year. The term combines the definite article ha, meaning the, with Shana, meaning year, specifying a particular year. This term is referring to the complete year, emphasizing events following a completed yearly cycle. The word Bashanah translates to in the year. This term combines the preposition ba, meaning in, with Shana, meaning year, situating events within the time frame of a specific year, indicating that actions occur before the year's completion. These events are occurring within the year specified. An example to understand these terms would be using someone's age. If I am 50 years old, this would mean I am Hashanah 50, or I have completed 50 years of life. If I apply Bashanah to my age, I am 50 years old, but turning 51 in 6 months. This makes me Bashanah 51, or in my 51st year. So I am Hashanah 50 and Bashanah 51. So let's look at Leviticus 25, 3 through 4, which is the first example of the integration of the civil year beginning in the fall with the religious year that begins in the spring. For 6 years you may sow your field and prune your vineyard and gather its crops. But in the 7th year there shall be a Sabbath of complete rest for the land, a Sabbath to Yahweh. Sowing the land begins in the fall at the beginning of the civil year, and reaping begins in the spring 6 months later. So 6 years of sowing and reaping would be from fall to fall on the civil calendar. If we count off 6 years of sowing and reaping, it is followed by a 7th year being the Sabbatical year, where no sowing or reaping will occur. Notice that the word Bashanah, meaning in the year, is used to describe the placement of the Sabbatical year. Adding our Abib, spring-based years, will give us this proper alignment. 6 years of sowing and reaping begin following the previous Sabbatical year. The following Sabbatical year begins in the 7th year, in the month of Tishri. This is 6 months after the start of the 7th year beginning in the spring specified by Yahweh. This shows the 6-month offset and connection between the two calendars, and the reason the word Bashanah is used for the placement of the Sabbatical year beginning in the 7th year. Again, God's Moedim, or appointed times, which are perpetual, are the calibration point beginning in the month of Abib or Nisan in the spring. This in turn determines the timing of the 7th month, begun by the Moed of Yom Teruah, which begins the fall-based Sabbatical year. The 6 years of sowing and reaping are on the civil calendar, and the timing of the civil calendar is thus determined by the spring calendar, showing the synchronization between the two. The words Hashanah and Bashanah are applied specifically to the language for the timing of the blessing of the 3-year crop during the Sabbatical and Jubilee year described in Leviticus 25:18 through 22. Using these key words in their original Hebrew meaning, we will see how both the Sabbatical and Jubilee year running from fall to fall are integrated into the command to begin the year in the spring with the month of Nisan or Abib beginning the spring calendar. Leviticus 25:18 through 22 describes the blessing of the 3-year crop. I have included the points in the verses where the terms Hashanah and Bashanah are used. I will break down these verses point by point to show how they align to the spring and the fall calendars. You are to keep my statutes and carefully observe my judgments, so that you may dwell securely in the land. Then the land will yield its fruit, so that you can eat your fill and dwell in safety in the land. And if you say, what will we eat in the 7th year, if we do not sow or gather our produce? But I will command my blessing upon you in the 6th year, and it will bring forth enough produce for 3 years. And you shall sow the 8th year, and eat of old produce until the 9th year. Until its produce comes in, you shall eat old harvest. Let's start with verse 20. And if you say, what will we eat, Bashanah, in the year 7th, if we do not sow or gather our produce? This reflects the Israelites' concern about food supply during the years of rest for the land. This would normally be the time when sowing the land would occur in the fall, in the 7th Nisan-based year to produce a harvest the following spring. But being that it is the beginning of the Sabbatical year, at the Moed of Yom Teruah, there will be no sowing done. Verse 21. But I will command my blessing upon you, Bashanah, in the year 6th, and it will bring forth enough produce for 3 years. Yahweh assures the Israelites that the harvest sown in the 6th year will be abundant enough to sustain them through the Sabbatical and Jubilee years, and until the next available harvest reaping. This blessing is placed on the crop sown in the fall in the 6th year, and it will come to fruition in the spring, where it begins to be reaped following the Moed of first fruits, through the fall, prior to the beginning of the Sabbatical year. No sowing or reaping will take place during the Sabbatical and Jubilee year. This crop will bring forth enough produce for 3 years. The starting point for this 3-year crop begins in the spring following first fruits in the 7th Abib or Nisan-based year. 3 years later to the spring after the completion of the 9th spring year, which is also the 2nd year in the next spring calendar cycle. The first portion of verse 22 states, and you shall sow Hashanah after the complete year 8th. Here sowing would again begin following the completion of, or Hashanah, the 8th Abib-based year. Sowing is done in the fall and would take place at the completion of the Jubilee year at Yom Teruah. Continuing in verse 22 it says, "And eat of old produce until Hashanah, after the complete year 9th, until its produce comes in, you shall eat the old harvest." So the old produce will be eaten from the 3-year crop until Hashanah, the 9th year is complete. This is when the 9th year crop, sown 6 months earlier, is ready for harvest, following first fruits in the spring. The key to understanding that these instructions for the placement of the Jubilee year are from Nisan being the beginning of the year is found in the portion that states, "Eat old produce until Hashanah the 9th year," or the 9th year complete. This places the reaping of the new harvest right where the 3-year-old harvest runs out. So to recap, Yahweh applies his blessing on the crop sown in the 6th year. The barley reaches its stage of Abib in the spring when reaping the harvest begins. From here it will begin to provide a 3-year crop. Harvesting continues until the fall when the Sabbatical year begins at Yom Teruah. Sowing and reaping cease during the Sabbatical and Jubilee years, which are in the fall to fall cycle. This is the time when the land rests for 2 complete fall to fall years, referenced by the white bar. Sowing the land begins again at the completion of the Jubilee year in the fall following the completed 8th spring or Nisan year. This crop is then ready to be harvested after the completion of the 9th spring year at the beginning of the following year, which is the 3rd year in the next spring week of years. If you want to read an excellent scholarly book on Leviticus 23 through 27, I recommend Jacob Milgram's book. Our findings on the placement of the Sabbatical and Jubilee year in relation to the Nisan-based year align with the formulation presented by Nachmanides, known as Ramban. Ramban was a leading medieval Jewish scholar. On Table 4, page 2183, is his summary that aligns with our findings. Now that we've learned how the Jubilee year fits into the Sabbatical week, let's look further into how this week is integrated into a Jubilee cycle. "And you shall count off 7 Sabbaths of years, 7 times 7 years, so that the 7 Sabbaths of years amount to 49 years. Then you are to sound the horn far and wide on the 10th day of the 7th month, the Day of Atonement. You shall sound it throughout your land. So you are to consecrate the 50th year and proclaim liberty in the land for all its inhabitants. It shall be your Jubilee, when each of you is to return to his property and to his clan. The 50th year will be a Jubilee for you. You are not to sow the land or reap its aftergrowth or harvest the untended vines, for it is a Jubilee. It shall be holy to you. You may eat only the crops taken directly from the field. This year of Jubilee, each of you shall return to his own property." The mention of the 7th month, Day of Atonement, and the 10th day directly ties the counting of the Jubilee year to the civil calendar. Tishri is the 7th month in the spring calendar, but the 1st month in the fall calendar. Therefore, the counting of the Sabbatical and Jubilee years begin and revolve around events in Tishri. Here we count 7 Sabbatical years, which begin and end in the fall. Then it says to count 7 times 7 years, totaling 49 years. Sabbatical years are on the fall-to-fall civil cycle, so each of these years would be counted fall to fall. The year following, being the 50th, is designated as the year of Jubilee, proclaimed on Yom Kippur, the 10th of Tishri, in which sowing and reaping are also not permitted. Let's now take what we've learned about the placement of the year of Jubilee in the Sabbatical week and combine it with the cycle length. The Jubilee is the 50th year following the 7th Sabbath year, being year 49 in the cycle. Each cycle is 49 years in length, so the 50th year is also the first year in the next cycle. So here we have the 7th week of years from the preceding cycle and the first week of the next, beginning with the year of Jubilee. The blessing is placed on the crops sown, Bashanah, in the fall of the 6th year, and matures to the stage of Abib, referenced by the purple bar. The crops begin to be reaped in the spring at first fruits of the 7th spring year in the month of Abib, and the reaping continues until the beginning of the Sabbatical year, referenced by the green bar. This is where the Israelites ask, "What shall we eat?" as no sowing or reaping will occur in the Sabbatical and Jubilee years. The orange arrow represents the 3-year crop provided that will sustain them. At the conclusion of the Jubilee year, sowing again begins Hashanah, or after the completed 8th spring year. Reaping of this crop sown begins in the spring in the month of Abib, Hashanah, or after the completed 9th spring year. This reaping would begin spring year 3 in the next week of years. So why does God use Hashanah, or after completion of the 8th year, for his instruction for the resumption of sowing the land? Looking at it, he could have said Bashanah, meaning in the 9th year sowing would begin again, right? Sam and I have come up with the thought that this is further detail, that the events described with Bashanah are used in the Jubilee cycle being described, and the events using Hashanah are in the next Jubilee cycle after completion of the previous. The instructions are for the placement of the Jubilee year and confirmation that the ending of one 49-year cycle ends with the Sabbatical year, and the beginning of the next cycle begins with the Jubilee, being the first year in the next 49-year cycle. This is a complete Jubilee cycle of 7 times 7 weeks of civil years, totaling 49 years. Each week ends with a Sabbatical year totaling 7. I have aligned the fall-to-fall years with the spring-to-spring years appropriately. The last week of years from the previous Jubilee cycle, being civil years 43 through 49, is above the complete 49-year cycle. The 49th year is also the 7th Sabbatical year in the previous cycle. This shows that the first year in the next cycle is a Jubilee year. It would count as year 50 and also year 1 in the next cycle. I have also placed the first week of the following Jubilee cycle below the full 49-year cycle. This maintains a constant 7-year cycle rhythm and ensures the Sabbatical years occur every 7th year without delay. The 49th civil year, being the 7th Sabbatical year in the cycle, is always preceded by the blessing of the crop sown in the 6th year to span the time the land rests during the Sabbatical and Jubilee year. We have seen this same example of counting weeks in the festival of Shavuot from my 70 Weeks to Creed video. First fruits is the day following the weekly Sabbath of Passover, and is the first day in the next week. From here it is 7 weeks, or 49 total days, to the 7th Sabbath day. Shavuot is the following day, being the 50th and the first day in the next week. This makes the time between first fruits and Shavuot 49 days. Here I have labeled one Jubilee year as first fruits, and the following Jubilee as Shavuot, to show the similarity in the counting. The only difference is that it is 49 years instead of 49 days. God has provided the proper example for counting to the year of Jubilee in the Feast of Shavuot. We've learned that the perpetual cycle and connection between the Moedim and the harvest create an uninterrupted week of years and is the clock that sets the timing for all the events in the Hebrew year. As long as the earth endures, seed time and harvest, cold and heat, summer and winter, day and night shall never cease. This interconnected system ensures that religious observances, civil events, and agricultural practices remain in harmony and are set by the timing of the religious spring-to-spring year. This would seem to explain the month of Abib being the Rosh Hashanah, or head of the year, commanded by Yahweh to Moses and Aaron in Exodus 12. I hope you enjoyed the findings presented by my friend Fisherman and myself. Thank you for watching. Shalom, and to God be the glory.